In this video, I want to show what I believe is the history of the Honeywell Flame Safeguard. You can see in the picture here on the left that the uh, Honeywell Flame Safeguard here is the modern version RM Series 7890. And here is the actual nameplate. You see here the nameplate for this dispatch oven. This oven was installed, or is installed, at a plant in Columbus, Ohio, National Electric Coil. To my knowledge, what I've been able to find out, this oven was installed in the plant in 1952. I'd worked on it a couple times and noticed that it had an original flame safeguard on there. Obviously, this is not the original. You can see behind that where the original was. And it was something I had never seen. Now, I have been doing HVAC commercial industrial service for over 40 years. And when I saw the flame safeguard that was on there originally, I thought this must be one of the oldest flame safeguards in the world. I took these pictures of it. I actually have this. It is from Honeywell. It's called a Protect-A-Glow combustion safeguard. The interesting thing here is it says it's Brown Instruments Division of Honeywell. And the Protect-A-Glow, you see the lens here, there is actually an indicator light that shows when the Protect-A-Glow, actually the indicator light shows when it's off, but you can see how it's painted orange, and it was actually right here before we upgraded to the newer version flame safeguard. But I do believe this is the oldest functional flame safeguard in the world, and I have a YouTube video that I made when I took this off and replaced it. I took it and cycled it a couple times. It does function. You know, it is so outdated that we couldn't actually leave it there with some of the modifications we did to that oven. So we upgraded it. But if you take a look, here is the patent for the Brown Protect-A-Glow system. This goes back to July of 1938. And this was a patent applied for by the Brown Instruments Company in Philadelphia. And that is from the research I did, I figured out from Brown Instruments Division here that when I looked up Protect-A-Glow, this is actually the patent for that particular controller. Here are some of the other patents for the Brown Instrument Company. And this, I think, is very interesting because it goes back to how a flame safeguard was originally designed. You're trying to prove that there is a pilot flame present before you light the main flame, and that is the purpose of this control, is to monitor whether flame is present before the sequence proceeds to lighting the main flame. And you'll see in the text here, it was the object of this invention was to provide a system, class described wherein means are provided for distinguishing between an actual condition of combustion or flame and a simulated condition. And talks about here about being able to control the combustion for automatically ignited fuel. Back in the day, there was coal burners, and you didn't automatically light that. But on gas-fired equipment, they needed a means to automatically light it safely. This patent was applied for in 1937. Here's another patent for the Brown Instrument Company that goes back to 1946, and this was kind of a upgrade to that. It talked more about the specific invention, flame responsive for fuel burners, utilizing electrical conductive property of the flame, and now we call that flame ionization, or what a flame rod detects is the ability for current to pass through a flame. And most people know nowadays that flame rods are probably the most common type of flame detection available. They're used on most residential furnaces, and flame rods are very common. Some of the history of the Brown Instruments Company I thought was pretty interesting. It talks about here in this paragraph, treasurer for the Minneapolis Honeywell Regulator Company, which was the original name for Honeywell, was seated next to Richard Brown, who was the son of the owner for Brown Instruments Company. You can see that up here. And it talks about them being on a train to New York after the National Recovery Act meeting in Washington, D.C., and their discussion about the similarities between their respective companies. And then here, the last sentence of the paragraph says, in 1934, Minneapolis Honeywell bought Brown Instruments assets for $2.3 million, becoming one of the several acquisitions of Minneapolis Honeywell or Honeywell over the years. So I think the Flame Safeguard, or the Protected Glow, was invented by the Brown Instruments Company, which later was acquired by Honeywell. And here is the last part of that company history. It says the Brown Instruments name survived until 1949, at which point it became the Philadelphia Division. And it talks about the Brown Instrument Division still being on some company records. So when I was trying to date this controller, this is the Protected Glow controller. This is the backside of the cover. It does say Honeywell Brown Instruments Division, just like it said on the front. And then this is the inside part of this is what you see underneath the cover. Here's the actual light that shines through the lens there. There's a relay pack up here, terminal strip. This is actually called a W124, and if you're familiar with Honeywell part numbers, the W124 is actually it's a component, but you'll see inside the controller is actually this flame safeguard, or this what we call nowadays a flame safeguard. Back in the day was called a combustion control. To zoom in on the actual combustion control, or the flame safeguard, I should say, this is what it looked like. And most people would look at this, and I did when I first saw this. I said that is a RA890, and here is a picture of a fairly old RA890. Has the vacuum tube amplifier just like the one in the Protected Glow. I know these letters here, JT. This is on the actual W124 back plate, and then this is on the R190BX. So they have the same date code. I do not know what this date code is, but I think from the literature that I've seen, it probably is from the 1940s to maybe up to 1952 when the oven was installed. But this to me shows that this particular flame safeguard is original to this W124 controller that it's mounted to. And the model number here is the R190BX18L. You can see here that the RA890E 1181, which was the Honeywell flame safeguard that became the RA890, very common, very popular flame safeguard. But the neat thing is, you see the 5 screw holes here, and then there's 5 more on the opposite side. It's the same. This controller could mount to this sub base, the W124 base. The RA890E 1181, I'm not sure when they did away with the vacuum tube, but I'm sure it was probably in the 70s, 80s, 90s, somewhere in there. And this is the current model of the Honeywell, I wouldn't say current, but this is the more modern version of the RA890, the RA890F1346, very common. You can see that the reset button is no longer down here in the lower left. It's actually more towards the center. And the relays have changed. Instead of sitting there, now they're here. And basically the way this flame safeguard works is it has a relay that calls for the ignition when there's a call for heat or call for the burner to fire, and then it has a flame proving relay here once it measures that current through the flame with the flame run. And most of the R890 series were using flame rectification or flame rods as a means of detecting flame, which goes all the way back to the patent that Brown Instrument applied for back in the 30s and 40s. And now this is the cover. This is the R890F with the cover on it. But nowadays, this is what we use is the RM7890. Still, been around for 25, 30 years, but this is still a current Honeywell flame safeguard. And that kind of leads me back to the original picture here, is that we took a Honeywell Protected Glow manufactured by Brown Instruments, and I believe this was probably manufactured in 1949 because they did away with the Brown Instruments division name prior to that. So it could go back as far as probably 1940s, early 1950s, but it was the flame safeguard on this oven until we updated to the RM7890. You can see on there now. But that's what I believe is a history of the Honeywell flame safeguard.